The police report was one sentence long. Man falls from ladder, tragic accident. It was almost right. He did fall from a ladder, but it wasn't an accident. And it wasn't tragic. It was meticulous.
Welcome to The Dead Don't Lie, the podcast where we listen to the stories the evidence tells. I'm your host, Alex Carter, and today we are joined by someone who has spent over 20 years translating the language of the dead. In this episode, you're going to hear about the man who fell from that ladder and why the simplest cases are often the most deceptive. We'll also explore a case that felt like a prank gone wrong until one detail revealed a chilling truth. And later, we'll ask our guest what forensic movies get completely wrong. You might be surprised. Our guest today is Dr. Elias Morven, a forensic pathologist with over 25 years of experience, speaking for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Dr. Morven, thank you for being here.
The pleasure is mine, Alex.
Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer for our listeners. This podcast features fictionalized stories inspired by real forensic principles. Names, events, and cases are entirely invented for storytelling and educational purposes. All right, doctor, let's start at the beginning. For those of us whose entire knowledge comes from television, what does a forensic pathologist really do?
You could say we're biographers. We tell the last chapter of a person's story. When someone dies under suspicious circumstances, their story just stops. My job is to find the evidence that writes the final sentence.
So it's more than just autopsies in a cold, sterile room.
Oh, much more. The autopsy is a critical piece, but just one piece. You have to review medical histories, toxicology. You have to go to the scene. You have to understand the context. The body can tell you how a person died. The scene, the context, that's often where you find the why.
That makes sense. But it leads to the question I have to ask. Why choose a job surrounded by death?
It's a fair question. I was a very curious child. I wasn't morbid, but I was obsessed with puzzles, jigsaws, logic problems, anything with a solution waiting to be found. When I was in medical school, I realized the human body is the most complex puzzle there is. And after death, it's a puzzle with a real answer if you just know how to look. It isn't about death for me. It's about finding a final, undeniable truth. There's a peace in that, in the pure logic of it.
A piece in logic. I like that. So what's the biggest thing people misunderstand about what you do?
The eureka moment. On television, a detective finds one magical fiber and the case is solved.
Right, the smoking gun.
Exactly. In reality, it's almost never like that. It's more like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It isn't one big piece of evidence. It's dozens of tiny, boring facts that mean nothing on their own. But when you put them all together, they build a story that can't be denied. It's about the weight of all the small things.
Which brings us to that case you mentioned at the start, the man and the ladder. It sounds like one of those cases where the small things were everything.
It was the epitome of it. We had a man named Arthur Pence, a retired librarian in his late 60s, lived alone, loved his garden. He was found by his neighbor at the bottom of a tall orchard ladder, hedge trimmers nearby.
Okay, so it looks pretty straightforward.
Exactly. The responding officer saw a clear-cut accident. He had a significant head injury consistent with a fall from that height onto the stone pathway below. No signs of a struggle, nothing seemed out of place. The case was, for all intents and purposes, closed before I even saw the file.
So why did you even look twice?
Routine. Every case gets a review. When I examined Mr. Pence, something felt wrong. It was a lack of evidence, rather than the presence of it. A lack of evidence? His hands. Think about it, Alex. If you fall, what is the first thing you do? You put your hands out to break the fall. Instinctively, he was supposedly trimming a large, rough hedge. His hands should have had small scratches, some dirt under the fingernails, maybe residue from the tool's handle. If he fell, his palms should have been scraped, bruised, something. And they weren't. They were immaculate, as if he had just had a manicure. The hands of a retired librarian, not a weekend gardener who had just taken a 10-foot fall.
Wait, seriously? The entire case turned on clean hands? That's insane. Wait, hold on. So if his hands hadn't been so perfectly clean, if he'd done some gardening that morning, this would have been ruled an accident forever?
It was the loose thread, the one thing that didn't fit the simple story. So we pulled on it. We did a full toxicology screening and a much more detailed examination.
And what did you find?
On the back of his neck, hidden by the collar of his shirt, was a tiny red mark, almost invisible. The kind of mark you'd get from an insect bite. But under magnification, it was clearly a puncture from a hypodermic needle. The toxicology report came back positive for a synthetic paralytic agent, fast-acting.
Oh, wow. So he couldn't move. He couldn't put his hands out.
He was conscious, but completely paralyzed. Someone injected him, placed him on the ladder, and then just pushed. The fall was real, but it was only the final act. The scene was staged. The most convincing lies, you see, are always wrapped around the little bit of truth.
That's terrifying. The idea that something so meticulously planned could be hidden by something so simple. It makes you wonder what else gets missed. Have you ever had a case that seemed impossible from the other direction? Not simple, but unbelievable?
There was one a few years ago. A young man, a college student, found in his dorm room. The door was locked from the inside with a deadbolt. The only window was small, barred, and locked.
A classic locked room mystery.
Precisely. He had a single gunshot wound to the chest. The gun was on the floor near him, wiped clean of prints. The initial theory was suicide, but his family was adamant he wasn't depressed, and there was no note. The campus police were stumped. They called it a prank gone horribly wrong, but couldn't explain how.
Locked from the inside, gun there. I mean, how could it be anything else?
Because the physics didn't work. The bullet was recovered from his body, of course, but there was no corresponding bullet hole in the wall behind the chair he was sitting in, or anywhere else in the room.
What? So the bullet just vanished after it passed through him? That makes no sense.
It doesn't. And that was the impossibility that unraveled the whole thing. The scene was telling one story, but the body was telling another, and the body never lies. This is where we get into a concept called lividity.
Lividity, that's how blood settles after death, right?
Correct. Gravity pulls the blood down to the lowest points of the body, causing a purplish discoloration of the skin. It becomes fixed after several hours. The young man was found sitting in a chair, so lividity should have been prominent in his legs, his lower back, the parts of him touching the chair. Okay, and it wasn't. No, the lividity pattern was fixed across his entire back, from shoulders to heels. This told us unequivocally that he had died while lying flat on his back and had remained that way for at least 8 to 12 hours before being moved into the chair.
Whoa, so he wasn't even killed in that room.
No, he was killed somewhere else, left for hours, and then his body was moved into his dorm room and staged to look like a suicide. The killer put him in the chair, wiped the gun, dropped it, and then left, locking the deadbolt from the outside.
How do you lock a deadbolt from the outside?
It's surprisingly simple with older locks. A wire, a piece of stiff plastic. You can slide it through the door jamb and turn the knob. The illusion of a locked room was just that, an illusion. A piece of theater designed to make everyone stop asking questions. The greatest enemy of any investigation is assumption. Everyone assumed he died where he was found.
It's incredible how the body itself can debunk a whole crime scene. I feel like we should do a little masterclass. Let's do some rapid fire forensics. You ready? That's a masterclass in seeing what's really there. It reminds me, we had a request from a listener about a case that seemed straightforward but wasn't. They brought up drownings. How often is a drowning not what it appears to be?
Let's.
Okay, time of death. On TV, they say he died at 11:42 p.m. How do you actually figure that out?
We don't. Not with that precision. It's one of the biggest myths. Estimating time of death is not about finding a single moment, but establishing a window of time. Think of it like baking a cake. You know the oven's temperature and you know the ingredients. You can estimate that it will be ready in 30 to 40 minutes, but you can't pinpoint the exact second it's perfectly baked.
That's a great analogy. So what are your ingredients?
Body temperature, or algor mortis, rigor mortis, the stiffening of the muscles, lividity, as we discussed. Even the stomach contents can help. All of these are affected by the ambient temperature, the person's health, their clothing. It's a complex formula with many variables. We provide a probable range, not a deadline.
Next question. What do movies and TV shows get completely, outrageously wrong?
The speed and the certainty, the CSI effect. They'll find a single hair, run it through a machine with flashing lights, and in 30 seconds, they have a name, address, and social security number.
Yeah, that always seems a little too convenient.
In reality, DNA testing takes time. Evidence can be contaminated, degraded, or ambiguous. And the most glaring omission in Hollywood, the paperwork. My job is at least 50% writing reports. It's slow, methodical, and painstaking. It's not nearly as glamorous.
Final masterclass question. Is there always a clear answer? Do you always solve the puzzle?
No. And that is the hardest part of this job. Sometimes the evidence tells you exactly what happened, but it offers no clue as to who did it or why. Sometimes the cause of death is clear, but the manner, accident, suicide, homicide, remains undetermined. We can only interpret the evidence we have. We can't invent what isn't there.
That must be frustrating.
It is. But our role is to be objective witnesses for the court. We present the facts. The rest is for the justice system to decide.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit to a lighter, rapid-fire round. Short questions, short answers. You game?
Of course.
What is the most common mistake criminals make?
Overthinking the alibi and underthinking the basics. They create a beautiful, complex narrative for where they were, but they forget to wash the victim's blood off their shoes. They focus on the story and forget about the science.
The weirdest call you ever received.
A call about a suspicious death at a medieval reenactment fair. A tourist panicked when they saw a knight in full armor lying face down in the mud with an axe in his back.
Oh no, don't tell me.
The victim was a very dedicated actor who had simply fallen asleep in his fake pool of corn syrup blood after a very long lunch. The paramedics were not amused.
That is amazing. Okay, can evidence lie?
That's a fascinating question. I would say no. Evidence itself cannot lie. It is what it is. A fingerprint is a fingerprint, but its meaning can be twisted. Evidence can be incomplete, and an incomplete truth, I found, is far more dangerous than an outright lie. It lets people build a story they want to believe. The evidence is an honest witness, but it only answers the specific question you ask it. If you ask the wrong question, you get a dangerously misleading answer.
Last one. What is the hardest part of your job, emotionally?
Telling a family, I don't know. Certainty is a comfort, a form of closure. And when the evidence is ambiguous and I cannot provide that, that is a heavy silence to leave in a room. A case like that stays with you longer than you'd like.
I can only imagine. Dr. Morven, this has been incredibly enlightening. I have one final question for you. After everything you've seen, all the darkness, the puzzles, the tragedies, what should people remember?
That life is incredibly fragile, but truth is remarkably resilient. It can be buried, twisted, ignored, but it doesn't decay. It waits. And in the end, very little stays hidden forever. We should all try to live our lives in a way that we're not afraid of what the evidence might one day say about us.
A powerful thought to end on. Dr. Elias Morven, thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories with us.
It was my privilege.
If you want to hear more stories from the silent witnesses, make sure you subscribe to The Dead Don't Lie wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next time with a look at how forensic artists can rebuild a face from nothing but a skull. You won't want to miss it.